Hi everyone, it's Tasha. Welcome back to my channel. I'm always in thrift stores looking for high-end style home decor for a lot less than retail. I usually take you to thrift shops with me and we add some DIY touches, but in today's video, I want to share with you part 2 of my tips for how I went from a styleless, lackluster home just a few years ago to an increasingly stylish one on a thrift budget. Come on and join me and let's talk some more about how to thrift shop for a cohesive, curated home. In part 1 of this series, we talked about the major things I did to begin to transform my home. I shared with you how my first long-term home purchase inspired me to totally reinvent my style, and that began with deciding on one. I went from what I call a hodgepodge to a much more cohesive and high-end feeling home over the next couple of years. While it's still a work in progress, I'm so happy with how far I've come and how much I've learned about decorating, all while on a thrift store budget. We talked about honing in on your style and color palette, purging and organizing the home you have, hiding non-aesthetic items, and focusing on sourcing baskets and other high-impact decor first when thrift shopping, rather than amassing lots of knickknacks. While that's a quick recap, if you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you go and do so because those steps are foundational and can't be skipped if you're trying to achieve a cohesive and curated home. Now in part 2, let's get into more of the major items that I looked for when thrifting to transform my home and why I think they're important. The first item I want to talk about thrifting that has been so helpful to me on my home decor journey are trays. Trays are just super helpful for 2 big reasons. Number 1, they group items together and instantly corral your tabletop or surface odds and ends. A tray works like a unifying foundational layer. It can turn a group of disparate items on your coffee table, etc., like candles, matches, decorative objects, books, and what have you, into a pulled together vignette. I really can't say enough about how much difference it makes when you take small items and pull them all together into a tray, how much it instantly makes that surface look cleaner, more organized, intentional, more cohesive, and just more together. I have thrifted almost all the trays you see in my home. I haven't bought but one retail, and that was from TJ Maxx. And let me tell you, I've found some beautiful ones, as you can see. The second reason trays are a great thing to curate for your home is often for their texture. Especially if you're working with a neutral and/or an earthy color palette, texture is your best friend because it adds depth and visual interest to your design without the use of high contrast in your colors. It's not just woven trays that can add texture, but there are also leather, shagreen, wood, even wool trays that can all add varying textures to your home. The second item I want to talk about thrifting for a more cohesive and curated home are coffee table books. I love coffee table books because they are, number 1, interesting curated pieces that you can have out to display and flip through. In my opinion, books are a natural part of any elevated, well-appointed home, but they are doubly great because they can also make fabulous decorative pieces. I love to stack 2 or 3 coffee table books and lay them down horizontally on a coffee table or console table for an instant and easy piece of decoration. I also personally like to sometimes lean 1 or 2 of them against a large lamp or a vase. I like the casual and lived-in feeling that this can give to my design. It goes without saying that books are a great way to fill bookshelves, but also they are just great versatile pieces to decorate with on many surfaces. And the book section is one area of the thrift store that I always check before I leave. I would suggest focusing on large-scale coffee table books that will make a bigger statement when you lay them horizontally, rather than smaller, like novel sizes. And I'd also focus on books that are hardbacks and not so much paperbacks, although there may be some exceptions to that. I usually like to remove any dust jackets and show off the cloth binding underneath, so make sure when you're checking larger sized books while thrifting, you see what the inside looks like under that jacket, because while a jacket might be tattered or not aesthetically pleasing at all, maybe the binding underneath is beautiful. Some people do also like to collect smaller books for actual shelf styling, and thrift shops are a great place to pick up vintage or color curated groups of books for displaying in that fashion as well. I remember one yard sale a couple of years ago with hundreds of beautiful vintage books that she was selling for only 25 cents each. But as for larger scale books, they are great for being standalone decor or also kind of to use as a tray and sit an item on. And don't forget about just simply leaving a book open to a beautiful page that matches your color scheme sometimes as an easy way to display. You can see how this small object looks a little out of place just sitting on this large coffee table, but when I put it on top of a stack of books, now it belongs with those and it doesn't look off or out of scale anymore. You can also use aesthetically pleasing cookbooks as countertop decor in your kitchen or your dining hutch if you have the space. And as a side note, secondhand books can often still look absolutely brand new, so they can make great gifts. Books bought at retail prices can be so expensive, so never leave the thrift shop without casting an eye over the book section. Another item I suggest you zoom in on at thrift stores are frames and art. I've had lots of success over time with thrifting the frames and or the art that I need for my home. Sometimes I find stunning pieces of art and sometimes just the frames that I put my own printed or otherwise sourced art into. You can easily paint wash or stain wooden frames that are the right shape but not the tone you're looking for. I like to find open source images or browse digital downloads from my favorite Etsy shops and have those printed locally at Staples or CVS. Oftentimes, the vintage images like this one that you see for sale framed for high prices on designer sites are actually just open source images that you could find on your own or purchase for just a few dollars, already cleaned, cropped, and ready to print from an Etsy shop. One tried and true trick that I use a lot is to print out the images as a poster at the size I need them and then paint over it with matte Mod Podge to make it look like an actual painting. I know this works because I've had guests come in and say, "Wow, what a beautiful painting." And an extra tip, you can do 2 layers, letting the first one dry and then adding a second layer to get a thicker, more realistic effect. It may be easier to find frames in thrift shops than art that you love, and that's okay. I found this stunning frame a while back and it's one of my favorites.
The potential is just jumping out at me now that the stuff that I don't like is not inside of this frame anymore. I am so ready to just go and pick out a print and see what I can do with this. It's gonna look so good.
I often use rub and buff on any gold tone frames that I love, but the color is too bright or yellow for my taste. This is how my latest faux painting from a piece of printed art turned out. This frame felt like an especially high value to me because it also included that beautiful linen matting. Another trick to elevate your thrifted art pieces is to create your own matting if your purchase doesn't include it. I loved the look of these Pottery Barn frames with this trendy, modern, oversized matting, so I created my own out of poster board, which you can see me do in the video linked above. You can find smaller art images in thrifted art books and also wrap existing matting that you don't like the color of with fabric for an even higher end touch on your thrifted art pieces. I'll show you how to do that in the video linked above. And that leads me to an unsung hero and probably one of the most money-saving items that you can buy when thrifting, which is fabric. Once I began to think about buying fabric, not just for whatever it was, like a tablecloth or a curtain, but for the fabric itself, I began to find more and more lovely fabrics that I could use to make napkins, placemats, cover books, cafe curtains, or picture frame matting, as described a moment ago. Retail linens can vary widely in price, but can definitely be very expensive from designer sites. So while I'm browsing designers' blogs and storefronts, I always keep an eye out for what types of fabrics and prints they are using, and keep my eye out for similar fabrics at thrift shops so that I can bring designer-inspired touches into my home as inspiration strikes. I also have found great deals on linens to be used as they are. For example, a $400 plus linen duvet cover, a king-sized crate and barrel duvet and sham set, new linen napkins from McGee & Co., and throw blankets from Pottery Barn and even RH for just a few dollars each at thrift shops. Don't skip those tousled looking linen bins because there may be something inside just waiting for you to use it as is or create something beautiful with. Pottery and vessels are one of my favorite things to pick up secondhand. Besides the functional reasons, pottery, vases, and vessels are important in interior design because they can add warmth, authenticity, and a sense of hominess to a space. Pieces with natural, organic shapes and earthy tones add a rustic feel to a space, which is why they're very important in styles like mine, where modern meets warm traditional. Pottery's porous earthiness can also balance out the sleek lines of modern furniture. I like to look for pieces that are more artisan style and aren't mass produced, or at least they look that way. They might only be from Hobby Lobby. I'm not a design snob, but I like pieces that at least look handcrafted. They have a way of adding a cultured, curated touch to a room immediately. As you can see by the images I'm including, I've come across some beautiful pieces secondhand for pennies on the dollar. I always get so excited to find a beautiful vessel. One of my favorite design tricks is to incorporate the element of repetition by placing two echoing vessels beside each other, usually one a bit larger than the other for height variation, for an instantly intentional and curated look. Repetition in general can help create a cohesive space that feels balanced and well thought through. And just because a vessel may not be the color or texture you're looking for, it doesn't mean you should pass it up. Paint mixed with baking soda for texture works wonders to give a piece a new earthy look in whatever color you're looking for. And vessels can stand alone and be a beautiful part of your environment all the time, even without florals in them. But that brings me to my next item, which is florals. They can add color, texture, and life to a space, not only enhancing the visual appeal, but creating a welcoming atmosphere and positively impacting mood. Florals can be incorporated into diverse design styles by choosing arrangements that align with the overall aesthetic. Now, designers don't all agree on the point of faux or no faux. There are designers who pride themselves on never using faux florals, only fresh. But others, like Shay McGee, who you all know that I love, have said that that is kind of low-hanging fruit and pointed out that fresh greenery isn't always possible or practical for some spaces or individuals. So I'll let the experts battle that out. What I can say is that personally, I love to incorporate both real and faux greenery and florals into my home. And nowadays, there are so many faux options that look very realistic and beautiful. My faux florals are usually a mixture of retail and secondhand. So when thrifting florals and greenery, I think it's important not to settle for cheap or cheesy looking stems just because they cost less. I avoid flowers that are tattered, have faded petals, or any stems about which I would say that they look good from a distance. Because rather than elevating my space, that's going to put a damper on the ambiance of my home. And remember that you can take apart pre-made arrangements and use the individual stems. Don't neglect simple foliage and greenery, since it can often look more realistic than the flowers themselves, and just greenery alone can be stunning. If you're like me and you're not the best at creating floral arrangements, don't worry. Displaying just one type of stem or greenery on its own can look fantastic. It's an easy, no-fail solution, and it's what I'm seeing most often in current designer photos as well. A handheld steamer is wonderful for fluffing wrinkled or smushed florals or leaves. And once again, it sounds kind of weird, but it's definitely possible to paint stems that are the right shape but aren't the color you're looking for. I also make sure not to forget about any free foliage that might be available in my own backyard. Now let's talk about metals. We all know that brass candlesticks, catch-alls, and boxes can add a bit of warmth to any space. You can clean them up, but many designers prefer to keep the patina. But other metals like silver, chrome, and steel are trending right now in interior design. Chrome and polished nickel in particular are rising in popularity, and since they're more bright and reflective, they can add a sleek, modern look to a space. Using a lot of these shiny metals can get flashy and reach the point of overkill, but used sparingly, they contrast really nicely with the warmer toned interiors that are popular right now. With any metal, using too much can make your space begin to look cold, but in the right dose, metals can add a touch of sleek sophistication and modernity. It's important to balance metal elements well with other materials to create a cohesive and harmonious look. Pairing metals with natural materials like wood and stone can create a beautiful contrast and add warmth to a space. Whichever metal fits your taste and design better, you're sure to be able to find some pieces of it at the thrift store like I have. When shopping secondhand, make sure to look closer at any sets that you find, since they can be thrift gold. While it's easy to find one-offs at thrift stores, it can be a lot rarer to find multiples or sets of the same item. So if the item is a good one, I often like to grab both or all of them because a set of something can add a touch more intentionality and sense of planning to your design, especially with things like candlesticks, baskets, or storage boxes. As an example, I was so excited a while back to find two velvet Pottery Barn pillow shams complete with the original Pottery Barn inserts in them at Goodwill. They worked perfectly on my two accent chairs in our living room. However, as a disclaimer, a set of something that is junk is just double the junk. So a rule I have for myself is I make sure that I really like the item for its own sake and would happily buy it as a single before I consider buying multiple. And that about wraps up today's video. Thank you so much for watching this part 2 of thrifting a cohesive and curated home. There might be a part 3 coming up. I do have some more ideas, so let me know in the comments below if you would like to see that. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing if you would like to see more of these in your feed. Have a great week, and until then, I will see you at the next video.